welcome back to my channel. My name is Carly Stevens. This is Carly Stevens Books for all things writing, publishing, and indie author life. And I am very excited to have Ben Wolfe here with me. So, award-winning author Ben Wolfe has made a career of writing action-packed horror, sci-fi, and fantasy novels, including his exciting Tech Ghost trilogy and his acclaimed Blood Mercenary series of sword and sorcery books. Ben has written more than 25 books across the genres of science fiction, fantasy, horror, children's, young adult, historical fiction, and nonfiction. So we'll definitely get into some of this multi-genre writing stuff because you're like man after my own heart there, but it can be tough. He produces stories that question the boundaries of morality, faith, justice, and interpersonal relationships. And he always does it with lots of action, explosion, gunshots, sword fights, and battles. When not writing, he occasionally chokes people in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He lives in the Midwest with his gorgeous wife and their cats Marco and Ivy. Ben loves connecting with his readers in person, which is what we're going to be talking about today. No matter which of his books you pick up, you can count on high-quality action and adventure, relatable and interesting characters, and stories you'll remember long after you've read the last page. So thank you so much again for joining me, Ben.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about today's topic, which is all about in-person events, really making the most of those, connecting with readers in a way that not every writer considers at first. So would you just kick things off and let us know, how did you get into writing all these books in all these genres in the first place?
Well, like you, Carly, I'm sure that you've got tons and tons of different ideas, and they don't necessarily all fit nicely into one genre or even one set of genres and subgenres. For me, the ideas can come from anywhere, and as a result, I have a wide range of published books in a wide range of genres. And so pretty much whatever the story is that's gnawing at me, that's the story that I feel like I generally speaking, that's the story I feel like I need to write next.
Hmm.
So that's why I have a Western, I have a vampire novel, I've got sci-fi, fantasy, young adult, horror, children's. I've got all these things because at different parts in my writing journey, those were the stories that were coming at me and begging to be written, bothering me incessantly until I actually did some real work on them. And so I have stuff in a bunch of different genres now, and I'm not sad about it.
What was the decision to keep everything under one name instead of, setting apart kind of which audience would appreciate which type of book? I know this is a little maybe off topic, but you have so many under your own name. I find it interesting.
This was a twofold decision. The first part of it was that I didn't want to manage multiple pen names because, quite frankly, I'm doing a terrible job of managing my current name. And so having to manage two or three other ones, it just seems like a nightmare. The second thing is that if you look at uh, certain famous authors, I'll just put Stephen King out there. He can write in whatever genre he wants at this point, and people will buy his books. And so for me, I'm playing a long game in that regard.
Hmm.
My thought is that someday, when something I do hits it really big, people who like what I've written for that particular book or that particular series, they're going to think to themselves, well, what else does he have? And then they'll find, oh my gosh, he's got all these different genres. And then they can sort of just pick from a menu like you're at a restaurant
Hmm.
what flavor they want to go with first. So it's both the short term strategy of not wanting to manage and wrangle multiple pen names, as well as the long term strategy of just, if I can do all these genres, why not do them?
Hmm. Yeah, I like that. It's not the kind of common wisdom around, being an indie author, but I love seeing people break out of some of those molds and try something new and, have it work for them. So you do a lot of in-person events. You connect with readers. There is that kind of personality that people are buying into, not just the book itself, which I think is helpful there. So when people think of live events, often they think of like a bookstore, book signing, or something. However, there are lots of additional kinds of live events besides that. So, can you just give people an example of what else is out there and how you can start to get involved in those other opportunities?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And then circling back very quickly to the multiple genre point,
Sure.
if you're planning to do live events, it's actually a good thing to have multiple genres. The traditional wisdom that you were mentioning, of course, is that it's good to stay in your lane until you're established in one genre. But for an author who's doing live events, if you have multiple books in multiple genres, then again, it's like that awesome restaurant menu where if someone comes up and says, I'm a reader, what do you have? You can say, well, I've got this and this and this and this and this, and they're all different. Then there's a higher probability that they're going to purchase something from you.
Mm.
And then, of course, if they purchase something from you, there's a higher probability that they will want to buy something else later on if you do a good job with whatever book you sell them the first time around. To your point and to your question about other live events that you can do as an author, I've had outstanding success with comic conventions, with pop-up events at malls because people are already there to go shopping. And so when they see books, especially when they see books by a local author or a local-ish author, depending on how far I've driven to get there, they want to stop and see what's up. Craft fairs are another really good one.
Mm.
People who attend craft fairs are looking for that handheld experience. And so having print books available fits really nicely into that sort of ambiance that you get when you go to a craft fair. And then gaming conventions, a friend of mine, another author, remarked that people who come to gaming conventions, specifically board game conventions, come with a lot of room in their trunk because some of these board games are quite big. And so that bodes well for authors who are looking to sell books there because physical books can take up a lot of space. That's why we have bookshelves. That's why we have book bags and ad nauseum, right? So all these different types of events are really fantastic, and I've had outstanding success with all of them. The main thing that I would recommend is just look around, Google, Facebook, see what you can find that's local, start small, and just try some things out. See if you can make your money back, see if you can turn a profit, see if you can add people to your mailing list as a result of going out there and meeting them face to face.
Is there a particular place that gives you lists that you refer to, or do you just Google, your city or your state Comic Cons, or is there a particular way that you go about that?
Yeah, I have a few different strategies that I employ. If I were to pick the top three, it would be uh, I I use Google. I do a search for comic conventions, broadly speaking, and then I kind of narrow it down as well to my region or to my area. Usually, I do a search. For example, in May of next year, I've got nothing booked currently, and that's bad because I need to have some things booked for May. So what I'll do is I'll do a search for comic conventions in May and
Mm.
just kind of leave it at that. And then based on the different lists that'll populate, because there are aggregate sites that list all the different comic conventions nationwide and even some internationally
Hmm.
that I could potentially go to, I'll start kind of sifting through those and seeing if there's anything relatively local or driving distance and see if I can get into one of those. Sometimes they're really big ones and sometimes they're not very big ones. Sometimes they're hard to get into, sometimes they're really easy to get into. Just kind of depends on how things go. And then another thing that I'll do, for example, let's take May again. If I can't find any big Comic Cons or any medium or even small ones, then what I'll do is I'll hop on Facebook and I'll go to the events section and just do a search for craft vendor show, like those three words. If I put those in, typically I find a lot of different options. Facebook is not the ideal search engine. You really have to kind of dig deep and to see what's out there because it'll let you search in your exact city or in an exact city. It won't let you search by region, which is
Hmm.
unfortunate. So instead of doing that, what I tend to do is just kind of do a search for a date range. So the month of May 2024. And then I just scroll endlessly until I see something that pops up and looks like, well, maybe this is an option. Maybe it looks like it's close. Maybe it's a couple hours away. Maybe it's 5 hours away, but okay, is it's going to be worth it? Pro tip there, if you see something that says 16th annual, then it's probably going to be worth attending because they've
Hmm.
been doing it for a while. They'll have a big audience. If it's third annual, maybe take that with a grain of salt. If it's the
Hmm.
first one, big, big grain of salt with that, because I have definitely done some shows where I show up and I'm maybe one third of the entire audience that shows up for the show. It's
Oh
not
no.
ideal, of course. So definitely try to do some research, look into it. You can, most cases, contact the organizer and just
Hmm.
ask some questions. How many people do you expect? Who else? How many vendors are you going to have? What's your, how many years have you done this event? Those types of things can help you get your wits about you when you're looking to do additional shows. And then the third one I would say would be ask other authors what's working for them, especially if there are authors who live near you or in your same region. You can ask them what shows they've had success with, and that can usually lead to some pretty good results too, because we're pretty honest with each other about this stuff. If the show is bad, we will be the first ones to tell you the show is bad. If the show is exceptional, then we'll be the first ones to brag to you how well we did at the show too. So you're probably going to get a really good answer from other authors about what shows are working for them.
And I feel like I should be taking notes. So I have some follow-up questions then.
Yeah, yeah.
So you mentioned that you are looking for events in May. Now, as we record this, it's the end of November. So
Yep.
for those kinds of cons and fairs and things like that, is it a good idea to be looking 6 months out and to be really lining up those events if that is part of your marketing strategy? Or can you
If
do
it's
it
part,
closer to the time, like 2 months out or something?
you can do it closer. Generally, the smaller the event, the closer to it you can get away with looking for it. But if you're looking for bigger events, then those are going to sell out their spots faster.
Hmm.
So you really need to be on your game as far as looking around and trying to find opportunities, bigger opportunities, if that's the type of show you want to go to. You have to get on the horse pretty early and start writing. Excuse me. So for me, I'm since this is a huge part of how I make a lot of my writing related income, I've already got shows booked, we'll say tentatively booked for the fall of next year, just because some of the shows that I do kind of do the same events in the same locations, more or less, the same time of the year. And so I already know some of the dates for fall and maybe even winter of next year.
Oh wow.
For but for whatever reason, May is always sort of a weird month because there just aren't a lot of shows happening in May, not a lot of comic conventions. I think there's
Hmm.
the Motor City Comic Con in Detroit, and I might even be wrong about that. But April's good, February's good, March, June, and the whole summer are good. But then May, it's kind of like people aren't really doing much. So I'm working on figuring out a better solution for May every year so I can find some additional options. Otherwise, I'll have to, I don't know, go on a vacation or something, which is frightening to me.
I mean, what a shame. A little
Yeah,
forced trip somewhere, maybe.
right.
And then secondly, you mentioned that you're looking for things that are in your area or in your region. I assume that that's because there might be an incredible event in London coming up, but it's just getting the inventory and all the booth and everything to that location. That's what makes it difficult. Is that why you just go within a certain number of miles from your house?
Generally, it's I like to be within 5 or 6 hours of home because then I can easily drive there.
Hmm.
The farthest I've gone for a show is probably about 6 hours at this point in terms of driving. In terms of flying, I of course did the rave event at 20 Books Vegas, and so I had to finagle some logistics for that.
I was wondering about that since it's pretty far from,
Yeah,
I don't know exactly where you are in the US, but I know Midwest, and
yeah.
that's a drive.
It is a drive. A good friend of mine, Luke Messa, whose debut sci-fi series is launching this month, by the way. So
Ooh,
Luke Messa, Messa, check him out, everybody. He drove down from Black River Falls, Wisconsin, through where I live in Iowa, and then all the way down to Vegas for the 20 Books Vegas conference, the last of its kind. And that's just what he does every year. He prefers to drive. He likes road tripping. And so he picks up a bunch of my stuff and takes it down there. So that was the logistics on that one. And then I have flown with books before to a handful of other events. I've done one in Philadelphia, I've done one in Atlanta. I've taught at a boatload of writers' conferences over the years. I think I'm over 65 conferences since 2012
oh wow.
nationwide that I've taught at. And so I would fly on occasion with books, but it's cumbersome and annoying, and your luggage is more likely to get damaged because just of the sheer weight of the books.
Right. Even if
So
you bring small ones, if you're bringing
yeah,
them in volume, then
yeah.
it still ends up being so heavy.
So risk abounds, and it's a risk reward proposition, right? If you don't bring the books, you definitely won't sell them, but if you do bring the books, then you're going to inevitably you'll be bringing some books home too. There was only one show where I flew with books where I sold out of all of them, and even then it was all of them except for one copy. I just couldn't get anyone to buy the last book, and I had bought like 30 of them too.
Hmm.
So it was a good show at the time for me, but yeah, unfortunately, I couldn't land the plane, metaphorically speaking, with that last copy.
So kind of circling back to the booth and how it's not just books that you bring, but it's the signage and kind of
Yeah,
the rest of what goes into creating a great space. I know I saw your live booth in Vegas, and it was beautiful and very involved. There was a lot to see. So
thank you.
what are um some ways to make the most of your space? Say you do look ahead, you get a craft fair table. What can you do besides just putting out, you know, a couple of your books and calling it good?
Sure. Great question. This is a question I get a lot. My answer is going to be multi-pronged, like most of my answers are. For maximizing your space, first of all, you need to really be sure that you're getting the size space that you're purchasing. Sometimes with the number of shows that I do, sometimes I don't remember, is this an 8 by 8? Is it a 10 by 10? Is it a 10 by 8? Is it something else? What size table is provided? Are they providing any tables? Do I need to bring my own? Stuff like that. You got to figure out the front end stuff before you can have a plan for the back end. Once you really have a sense of the size of your space and whether or not they're providing a table, then you can start to plan what you want to do from that point on. You mentioned you saw my display in Vegas. I had a big banner. It's an 8 by 8. It's enormous. That is there specifically to catch people's attention because, first of all, it's huge. And second of all, it's gratuitous because it says, "Meet the legend, Ben Wolf." And I'm not a legend, but most of the people walking by don't know that. And so they sometimes I'll get a quip, "Oh, you're a legend." It's like, yeah, sure, why not? It got you to come over, right? So that's the whole point of doing something crazy like that, is you just need to catch people's attention. If you have room for a big 8 foot by 8 foot banner and the accompanying banner stand that goes with it, which usually has a profile of a 10 foot width, as far as how when you're setting it up, it's going to be about that long, then by all means go for it, bring it, because it's going to help impact people and influence them to come over and visit you. If you don't have space for that, there are plenty of other options. You can get something narrower. You can not do a banner. You can do one of those pop-up
Hmm.
scrolly things. Lots of options. Vistaprint has options. Forover.com is the fulfillment site that I use for most of my big format printed stuff, tablecloths, table runners, banners, stuff like that. My next piece of advice would be to build upward instead of outward, because again, you're confined to this 10 by 10 or 8 by 8 or whatever size space. And if you can get some portable bookshelves, they sell these on Amazon, stack them behind your table or even stack them in the corners of your table, the shorter versions, then you can display more books building upward as opposed to having to spread outward and buy more tables or more spaces at these types of events. There will come a point where you might need to get uh, additional space at one of these shows, but it probably will take a while. I can tell you that the vast majority of shows that I do, I have one space and sometimes even less than one space if I end up sharing with another author who is sneaking me into a show. So my recommendation to you would be to build upward, because even if you have a lot of books, you can still display most, or if not all of them. And then of course there's the popularity factor. Your best-selling books are the ones that you're going to show the most. Your book ones of each of your series, your omnibus versions, if you've got a series out, put it all into an omnibus. Those will sell like hotcakes. Display those and stack them high. Even if you don't go for the bookshelves, make it look like you're there to sell books. Don't just have a smattering of a few books out. Put a bunch of them on the table, because then it looks like, oh, this guy's here to sell books. He's not just here expecting us, like, do we come up with a book that we already bought from you? Are we supposed to have a book already? Don't let there be any confusion. Make it very obvious you're there to sell books. So those are a few of my quick tips on that particular topic.
Do you think that people who do stay in their lane and write a big long series, maybe a mystery series or something, um could do as well? Like would you give these same suggestions to somebody who had that kind of backlist?
Yes, I would, but I would front load it, because more likely than not, people are going to they're gonna, in my experience, they're gonna do one of three things. If they're going to buy, assuming they're going to buy, they're either going to just get book one to try you out. They're going to maybe four things. Maybe they'll get book one and two if you're really good at finagling them into a sale. Book number three would be maybe they buy your trilogy. If you've got a trilogy of books out, maybe they'll just buy the whole trilogy of individual books. And then the fourth one would be they'll buy the omnibus version because they see this big juicy book and they're like, I want that.
Hmm.
For me, this year, my best-selling book has been my omnibus version of my four-book fantasy series. So it's 460 something thousand words all crammed into one enormous book. And it really is about this thick. It's fantastic. And so when I show that to people, some people go, ooh, and then some people, their eyes light up. It's like I've just proposed to them. They grab the book and they're like, yes, I want this. And that's, as I said, that's the book that I've sold the most of this year. So my suggestion for someone who has a deep backlist, all in one series, you don't have to bring as many copies of book six or seven or eight or nine or whatever. Front load it, have a lot of the most copies of book one, then slightly less of two, three, four, five, so on. But if you have an omnibus for the first three books, or first four or five or whatever, depending on how long they are, bring a bunch of those too. Bring almost as many as you would for book one, because there is a very different audience who wants that type of book as compared to the audience who wants to collect all the individual covers. It's two different types of readers. And if you have something for both of them, you're going to maximize your sales potential that way.
So the omnibus, the massive
Yep.
book, do you not run into any um printing issues with that? Because you need to, of course, I assume you're using a print on demand service that would send these books to your house. I'm surprised that that doesn't run up against the the top end of what can be printed and shipped to you. Has that
Right.
ever been a problem?
It has been a problem. Back when I'm no longer using a print on demand service, because I happen to find a printer pretty close to where I live, and so I'm able just to go pick up my books. So for anyone out there, any authors who are looking to print books, let me know. I can see if I can get you connected with them or whatever. So It was an issue at first. Back when it was print on demand, they that particular company changed their machines, and so I had to go to a thinner paper
Hmm.
in order to accommodate the spine and the binding. My current printer, due to COVID and all of the stuff that happened in 2020, there have been paper shortages that we've all been grappling with in the printing industry. And I say we, I mostly mean them, but me also because I'm buying a lot of these books. Now they use what's called 50-pound paper primarily for the books that I'm printing. The stuff that you would get if you ordered books from Amazon would be closer to 60-pound paper, so it's a little bit thicker, a little bit heavier.
Okay.
The 50-pound paper also happened to narrow the spine a little bit on the big omnibus book, so it does make it printable, if only just barely. It's almost 1,000 pages thick, and so that's kind of the ceiling. It's sort of the unofficial ceiling
Hmm.
for that particular series and that particular binding. And I've got the text shrunk really small thanks to Vellum to make sure that it all fits. Normally, I wouldn't put 4 books in an omnibus, but just the way that I wrote that series, it's got a book 0. And so putting book 0 on its own just didn't feel right. So it's in the omnibus. And then when I close out the series, hoping to do another 6 books total, I'll have 2 more omnibuses for that. And both of those will be trilogies. So yes, short version, you can run into some printing issues. Do your best to format it small enough, communicate with your printer on what works for them. And like I said, if you want me to try to help you get some printing done, just reach out.
Okay, yeah, will do. So any last tips and tricks for people who are looking to sell maybe at their first event and they're not used to hand selling their books? Like what are a couple just tricks that have really worked for you in that setting?
I've got a whole bunch of them. The first one is smile. The second one is stand up. Don't just be sitting down. You can sit down if you need to take a break or if you're incapable of standing, because that is a thing for some people, then by all means sit down. But if you can stand, please stand. And if you can smile, please smile. It makes you approachable. Think of it in terms of what is going to create the best experience for the person who's walking up to take a look at your books. It's about making them feel happy. I've got a book out called Power Author, a quick guide to mastering live events. It covers all of what we talked about and much, much more, including the sales process. And in that book, one of the concepts that I talk about is bonding over books. We've
Mhm.
all, as readers and writers, nerded out with our friends about, oh, this book was awesome. Did you like that? Oh, they butchered it in the movie. Oh, that was terrible. You're geeking out, right? You're bonding over books. It's the exact same thing when someone's approaching your booth. It's just that it's your books that you get to bond over,
Hmm.
which is a fantastic and awesome opportunity. So my recommendation to you in as the next part of that bonding over books process would be to physically hand them the book. Maybe you've only got 1 book out. Well, that's easy. That's the book you hand them. If you've got a bunch of books out like me, then you probably want to say, what kind of books do you like to read? And you want to keep it open ended. You don't want to say, do you like to read? Because it's either a yes or a no. If they say no, then the conversation's kind of over and they might walk away. But if you ask an open ended question that forces them to give you more than a yes or a no answer, then you're more likely to find a chink in the armor where you can just start poking and wear them down so they buy a book. Now, I use the term wear them down. You don't actually want to wear them down in the sense that you're being a drag on them. You want to keep things upbeat and positive and friendly, and you don't want to go for a hard sell. It's just not the right environment for that. Keep that in corporate offices and high powered brokerage firms. We don't need that when we're selling books. Instead, just focus on providing a great experience for them. So after you hand them the book, you give them your elevator pitch. If you're going to do an elevator pitch, you better know your elevator pitch. The ironic thing about my career and elevator pitches is that for years, I was trying to pitch my books to publishers and agents and all that, going to all these writers' conferences. I would have an elevator pitch ready to go. I'm using essentially the same elevator pitches for the same books that I was trying to get published. Now that I have published them myself, I'm using those on prospective readers,
Hmm.
and they hook people. They hook the readers, they make them interested, and then they want to know more. And so then they read the back of the book. That's why it's important to hand it to them. So make sure that your blurb is very good on the back of the book as well. Brian Meeks has an excellent book on writing blurbs, and Brian Cohen also does some great work on writing blurbs for the backs of your book too. So check them both out. And then probably at the end of all of it, you just kind of want to ask them for the sale. You know, can I send some books home with you today? Another thing I like to do is say, if you get some books, I'm happy to sign them for you. I'll sign them and personalize them for you. It's just that little extra bit that'll kind of maybe push them over the edge to get them to commit to making the purchase. And there's a lot more. There's a lot more nuance to it that I describe in my book. So if you want to check it out, you can. It's on Amazon. Otherwise, obviously, I have print copies too. So if you want a print copy and if you want it signed, feel free to check me out.
Okay, yeah, I was going to ask as we're wrapping things up here, how
Yeah.
can people find you and your books and all of what you've talked about online?
Everything I have is on Amazon. Most of what I have is currently on Kindle Unlimited, although that's going to be changing because I'm going to be selling the ebooks on my website
Mm.
early next year as well. So if you are a KU reader, then start downloading now because you're going to miss out on them if you don't grab them soon. And then my website is benwolf.com, BENWOLF.com. So wolf like the animal, there's no E at the end. Some people like to try to add that. Those are the best places to find me. You can also find me on Facebook. I know it's kind of an old people's social media platform these days, but I am an old people. So that's where you can find me. That's where I share a lot of my feedback and results and excitement for the shows that I'm doing. That's pretty much the content that I post there these days. And then I would say I also have a newsletter which you can sign up for on my website too, but that's mostly geared toward readers. So if it's you're more of an author, then it may not exactly be your bag. It would be instructive to a degree if you wanted to kind of see how I'm leveraging my live events to create content for my newsletter, but beyond that, I don't know that it would be super valuable for most authors.
All right, well, I will put those links down below in the description so
Sure.
you can check out Ben Wolf and all of his work. So thank you once again for spending this afternoon with me, just talking to me about live events. I hope that others got as much out of it as I did. So thank you.
Thank you.
So for all of you out there, like this video if you like it. Make sure to subscribe for more writing, publishing, and indie author life. And I'll see you next week. Bye.